The Tudors Dynasty Podcast.
Hello and welcome back to the show. Today, I am so happy to welcome back Sophie Bacchus-Waterman. Sophie, welcome back.
Thank you. Thanks so much for having me again. Really excited to be back.
I'm excited to have you back so soon after we chatted about your upcoming book on Elizabeth Boleyn. How is your work going on that since we last spoke?
Very well. A lot of progress has been made. The first draft is almost finished. I can't believe it.
Oh my gosh,
Yeah.
that's so exciting.
So exciting. Yeah, no, I can't quite believe it myself. There's a lot of gaps in the narrative that need to be filled, but it's completely written. There's just need to go back and fill some gaps. Yeah, it's very exciting.
I cannot wait. I'm so excited. And I think after the last episode when you were on, the listening audience is very excited for this book as well. So
yeah, absolutely. I think the feedback has been incredible. I think I said it last time, I feel like there was such a hunger for someone to write this book and people are just very excited to see it. So it's starting to feel real now, which is, very exciting.
Oh, well, congratulations. Getting a first draft done is a big step. So you've made it past that step.
Thank you. Now it just needs to be edited and fixed and tidied.
Right. You're still in there's still a lot of work to do, right? People think writing a book is easy, but it's a lot of work.
Oh, absolutely. Even going in, I didn't realize how much work it would be. And then now you're at the end of it, you look back and go, good heavens, it's a huge process and it's not even over yet.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Well, one of the things we talked about in the last episode was the research and original documents that you found doing your work on Elizabeth Boleyn. And one of the things we talked about off the show was your day job. And I am completely fascinated by what you do. So can you tell everybody where you work and what it is you do exactly?
Cool. So I work at St. John's College in Oxford, and I am the special collections photographer there. So I jokingly tell people that I spend all my time in a windowless basement, but it's much more exciting than that. I digitize the special collections, the early printed books and manuscripts from St. John's Library. So it's a great job. It's incredible. Some of the stuff we have there, the collection is amazing.
How do you get any work done? I would just spend my time staring at these things.
You do tend to, at the moment I'm working with a beautiful 15th century book of hours. You do get distracted sometimes when you've got those beautiful pages, but when you've got this manuscript is about 300 pages long, and then you do all of the rectos, that's all the right pages, then you flip around and do all the versos, all the left pages. So that's 600 images. When you've got a task like that in front of you, you do tend to just get on with it, and can't get sucked up into sort of, oh, what does this say? Or, getting too distracted by the documents themselves when you've got so much work to get through.
It just seems like such a cool job. I am fascinated by original documents. I got to see Henry VIII or a copy of Henry VIII's will at Exeter Cathedral Library when I was in England. And that was amazing just to see that and be able to touch it. That was such a big deal for me to be able to, I'm like, can I touch it? As I'm touching the corner of it, like, I just want to touch this.
Yeah, absolutely. It's incredible. The thing that drew me to the role when I got the job was the fact that a lot of people don't have access to original documents for whatever reason. Now, anybody can get a National Archives card, and go to National Archives. But there are some things that are perhaps restricted access, or some items that you don't know colleges have or collections, or there might be a pandemic, as there was in 2020 when I was doing my master's in book history at the School of Advanced Study. And so I couldn't go to see the documents I needed, but I relied on the digitizations of the British Library to write a lot of my essays. And so to be on the other side of that now as a special collection photographer, bringing digitized documents to people is so important to me, to think like there might be a researcher such as yourself who lives in America, or there might be a researcher who lives anywhere who can't necessarily travel to see documents in person, but then to be able to have an entirely digitized manuscript is so valuable for so many researchers. I'm quite big on pushing my social media presence with the work I do to inform people what's going to be up on Digital Bodleian. If listeners want to take a look, the St. John's College has a section on Digital Bodleian with all of the digitizations that are currently available for free in their entirety. And when I post about, what it is that's going to be put up, it's going to be put online, a lot of researchers have been, really pleased to see some of our collections be digitized, because it gives us more targeted research requests. It allows people access to not have to travel to go and see things in person. And it means you can just, look at things from home. it's great. I think the accessibility is so important. It's something that I benefited from massively.
It is so important because for me, obviously, I live in the US, and a lot of the research I wanted to do was with these original documents that I couldn't get to see myself in person. And so being able, and at the time I had to pay for every single one that I wanted to get access to a digital copy. Yeah. So I spent a lot of money getting digital copies of the things that I wanted, but it was so worth it in the end.
Really can be. If you can't handle the document in person, and I mean, digitizations are not a replacement for the original document. There's always going to be there's something about holding the real thing, seeing it in person that just is unbeatable. But if all you need is the content of that document, then it makes a perfectly good, surrogate. And the National Archives is great for digitizations as well. They have all their wills. You can download those, microfilm. Digitization it's been going on for 30 years, but it seems to really be picking up lately. St John's is one of the 2 colleges in Oxford who has their own dedicated digitization studio, the other one being Christchurch, who've been doing it for much longer than I have. And then all of the other digitizations that you see on Digital Bodleian, a majority of those were done at the Western Library in Oxford. They have a larger setup there with several conservation cradles where they do digitizations at a much faster and larger rate than I do.
I was curious too, now that you said that. Is it just you down in this windowless basement, or are there many of you?
It is. Oh, it sounds terrible when you put it like that. No, it's great down there. I'm very happy down there in my room. It is just me down there. So the St John's Digitization Project was originally 2 people, myself and my former colleague, Dr. Sian Witherden. The project was split into 2 halves. So Sian was the metadata side of things. So medieval manuscripts in Oxford libraries, everybody go and check out their website. That was making our medieval manuscript catalogue, which was written by Ralph Hanna in, I believe, 2003. That was making it accessible and searchable online. Those are the catalogue records of all of our medieval manuscripts. And that began in 2020. And then I joined in 2022, the other half of the project being the digitization of not our entire collection, because St John's College has, I think it's 20,000 early printed books and something like over 300 manuscripts. One person could not digitize that in their lifetime. So what was done is a short list of the 90 most important items in our collection were chosen. They were chosen on basis of visual appeal or important provenance or historical significance, and then those are the items that I'm digitizing. So it is just me doing that, but getting through that 90, some of those, like I said earlier, the longest one I've done so far was what we call the Caxton Chaucer, which is second edition copy of Chaucer's Canterbury Tale, and bound with other items as well. That totaled at 1,066 images. So some of the items take longer than others, but some of them could be quite quick, and it's a learning process. So, yeah.
Wow. Okay. So I have to know, thus far, what is the coolest historically important document you've scanned?
Oh, that's so hard to say. There's been so many incredible things. There was a prayer book that belonged to King James I. That was 6th of Scotland, 1st of England. That was amazing. That was incredible. There's been the Caxton Chaucer, which has to be a real, big hitter. That's very exciting. Beautiful hand-colored illustrations. MS-254, which is the oldest thing that I've digitized. I believe, I might be wrong about that. Certainly off the top of my head, it's the oldest one. MS-254, Alfred's Grammar, an Anglo-Saxon manuscript. That's incredible.
Wow.
Beautiful. Yeah, there's just so many incredible things in our collection. The St. John's collection really is full of some very impressive items. So yeah, some of them are complete digitizations, some of them are partial. Majority of them are completely digitized, though. That's bindings and everything, which is particularly exciting, because I think that with some digitizations, particularly early digitizations, they were only partially digitized or the bindings were left off. But a big important part of the St. John's digitization project is that the whole manuscript or the whole item is digitized. as far as it could be the binding as well. You know,
Wow.
often be something particularly exciting about that, if particularly it's original binding or a near contemporary binding. So yeah, it'd be it's like picking a favorite child. It could be impossible to choose. There's so many incredible.
I think you have the coolest job ever. I'm so jealous of you. I would love to be able to be with all of those historical documents every day. Although I would end up staring at them too long and not getting any work done.
Yeah, just looking at them in awe, reading them.
Do you by any chance remember the very first thing you scanned?
Yes, it was MS-40. So the way that we started, when I started the project, is we had a traffic light system. So it was green was the easy items, and then red was the hardest items. So if an item was particularly easy, that meant that it had no particularly conservation issues. So to backtrack a little bit, before digitizing anything, I do a pre-digitization check, which is a form you fill out and you take a look at the manuscript, or if it's a printed book, you take a look at the item, and basically just say, are there any conservation issues? You know, how is its binding? Is its binding sound? Are there any tears? Is there any damage? Will this book stand up to digitization? Which means turning every single page. Is it happy to do that? Is there anything that we need to be aware of? If something is flagged in the pre-digitization check, and if it needs conservation, then we talk to the Oxford Conservation Consortium, the Chantry Library. The wonderful team over there have been very helpful. If it needs digitization, if it needs conservation before digitization, we send it over to them, and then it comes back to us to be digitized. So we started with MS-40 because it is a particularly easy item. It was in good condition. You know, the pages turned easily. It was great. It's a really good starter. As the process has gone on, I've been in the role for just over 2 years now. You get sort of used to the equipment, more used to handling the books, less afraid of the books, you know, kind of as you go on, you sort of get more used to handling things, used to how the equipment works. And the traffic light system in the beginning, it was very much, does this item need conserving? And what is the easiest thing to be digitized as I was learning the role and how to use the equipment? And then, you know, it's now more a case of just the conservation, because the equipment, you know, is second nature. I do it all day, every day. So
just amazing. I think now that you're talking about this, we need to address the elephant in the room that's always in the room when you talk about handling historic documents. To glove or not to glove?
Not to glove. Not to glove. It drives me crazy. I can understand why, when you see people handling documents on television, often they're wearing white gloves. For some items, you know, if you're handling photographs, then yes, but the standard is clean, dry hands. If you're wearing gloves, you are less, you're more likely to damage the item, because you're just not as dexterous, you know, with gloves on. It's just so much easier. Clean, dry hands is the way. It's what they say at the British Library. It's what they say at National Archives. It's what we do. Not to glove, certainly.
Thank you. I can't tell you how many times on social media I see historians being attacked for not wearing gloves. And there's like this large population who's like, you have to glove. And then other people are like, whoa, 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 no, you don't have to.
It's not been the case for years. I've never, ever, you know, I've been to lots of institutes to look at all sorts of documents, not just in my role at St. John's, and you never do. Also, no nail varnish, no jewelry, no watches. I don't wear makeup to work, you know, just in case, because heaven forbid you get something on that book.
Well, right, exactly. Especially we touch our faces all the time, right?
Exactly. Yeah, you don't know that you're doing it. Or, you know, if you've got nail varnish on, or, you know, a watch might get caught on something. It's unlikely, but you just don't want to run that risk.
No, not when you have these ancient documents. Oh my gosh. Could you imagine if you'd be responsible for?
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, I'm so curious about the documents that you come across. And I'm curious also, have you ever come across anything with your day job that has impacted your research on Elizabeth Boleyn?
Unfortunately not. I wish I had. We do have some, you know, really amazing documents in St. John's. But really the list was pre-decided, as I said. So, you know, I went through it and have worked through it. I am currently, it's very much under wraps. I am currently involved in some research to do with one of our books in the St. John's collection. There'll be more forthcoming on that, but hopefully, next year. That is very secretive. So, teaser there for that, but nothing particularly to do with Elizabeth or Anne or anything in that way. They're two very, very separate avenues. There's the historical research that I do outside of St. John's, and then there's St. John's work, which is very much, as you say, my day job.
Yeah. Is there any Tudor era stuff in this list?
Yes, there is. So St. John's was founded in the 1550s, in the reign of Mary. So we do have some particularly exciting, stuff. One of the things I digitized, which is currently available on Digital Bodleian, everyone have a look. Off the top of my head, the shelf mark is MS301, and that has a letter signed by Elizabeth I, which is very exciting. When I handled that, I couldn't believe it. That was one of the early things that I handled that was particularly, which made you go, oh goodness, that's amazing. Yeah. So there are quite a few. Yeah.
That's really cool. I think I just always want to know, like, what's the coolest thing? What's the most surprising thing that you've run across? Do you have any crazy stories for me about documents that you've come across?
I suppose in the beginning, is it crazy story? Well, it came to mind, so I'll tell it. One of the things that you don't necessarily think about is how things are digitized. And one of the early problems that we came up against was, how do you capture gold leaf? So with a lot of the kind of beautiful illuminated manuscripts that you see, when you look at them in person, the gold kind of shimmers in the light, and we needed to know, how do you photograph that? Because if you photograph it with the lamps pointed straight at the document, it gives the gold leaf a sort of brassy, flat look, which isn't how it should look. It needs to shimmer like it does in real life. And so there was just a very surreal experience of, spending quite a lot of time trying to work out how to capture the gold leaf, how to get that shine. It took quite a long time to work out how to do it. And there are two methods that I use. So we bought a ring flash, which goes around the lens of the camera. And if you're photographing small details of gold leaf initials, let's say in a book of hours, using the ring flash captures the small details and makes it kind of shine. If you're photographing something with a lot of gold, so we have a manuscript in our collection, which we call the York Bestiary, which is a 13th century bestiary, which is absolutely covered in gold leaf. It's beautiful, that thing. And that required a different setup. So you turn the ring flash off for that. And then if you've got lamps, you point those at the ceiling, which bounces the light off the ceiling and down onto the manuscript, which gives it that gold shine that you see in some digitizations. And so if you're looking at digitization of a document with gold leaf and the gold is flat and doesn't reflect, it means they photographed it with the lamps pointed straight at the document. I'm not going to name anybody, but when you know kind of how it's done, you can see how it was done behind the scenes, which is very interesting. So yeah, that was there are just strange instances like that where you think, here's this 500-year-old document, and I'm thinking about something very technical and practical, how to photograph it best. So that was, I don't know if that's necessarily the kind of story you were looking for, but it's just
that's interesting.
Strange things when you work with these items. You've got to think about them in practical terms sometimes. How best to capture whatever it might be.
It's interesting to think about it that way, because when you see the scans, you just see a beautiful scan and you don't think twice about how it was made.
Yeah, exactly. And then you think about how, now I know how it's done behind the scenes, the practicalities. Yeah,
that's fascinating. So a lot of the times when you see manuscripts, there might be little doodles or scribbles or things written in the margins. Have you seen anything like that?
Yeah, we have a lot of marginalia in a lot of our manuscripts, and that's always really exciting. Those are the things I do stop and look at, because you just can't help, just beautiful doodles, ownership inscriptions I love, instances where former owners have practiced maybe their signature or copied the typescript in the printed book if it's a printed book. Really exciting things like that. That always really brings it to life. When you see, I'm sure that you love it too, handling old documents as you do, when you see the signs of those former owners, or the book of hours that I'm digitizing at the moment, actually, there is a illumination of the assassination of Thomas Becket, and a former owner has scratched that out quite ferociously. We've got a blog post on the digital library, which on our St. John's blog, which Dr. Sian Witherden, my former colleague, she wrote about the defacement of Thomas Becket in medieval manuscripts, using that as an example. So things like that are really exciting. You can't help but just stop and think, at some point in this item's life, someone did that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm going to ask you an off the wall question, and I don't even know that you can answer this.
Okay, I'll try.
Let's say, hypothetically speaking, you have a document that you can see there was something written out, but it's now everything on the document is completely scribbled out.
Yeah.
What do you think about that? What I'm just
Do
curious.
you mean where it's been erased or kind of crossed out? Because I say they're two different things, because there's some instances where it's been, some instances where it's been erased by a former owner. I'm thinking of the research of Kate McCaffrey, which I'm sure you're aware of, into Anne Boleyn's books of hours, where the ownership inscriptions, the marginalia had been scrubbed out by a later owner. But then you've got obviously different instances where it's been crossed out. When it's been erased, are you talking about like trying to recover it using photography?
This hypothetical, I'm just going to keep saying it's completely scribbled out. Like you cannot make out the words that are behind it, but you can tell that there were words behind it.
Yeah.
I'm so intrigued by this. I'm like, why would someone do that?
Why would someone do that? Yeah, I suppose it depends on what was there, doesn't it? You don't know. So that's the thing that's really annoying when, something's been erased or cut out. There are a couple of manuscripts in our collection where some of the illuminations have been cut out, by former owners, or some of the, sections of the page have been cut out. So unless you know what was there, then obviously you're never going to know why. In some books of ours, you've got instances where owners have crossed out the word Pope or, tried to erase that. That's quite obvious. It might be... sometimes it's for religious reasons. Sometimes they're replacing a former ownership inscription. If you've got this book was owned by John Smith and now it's owned by, George Derrick, he's going to cross out the former ownership inscription. So sometimes that's what's done. I think it's so fascinating. For me, the things that are particularly interesting are when you've got those doodles or somebody has just obviously needed to make a note of something in a manuscript and they've used it, almost not like scrap paper, but, to practice, particularly if it's children's writing, to practice their handwriting or to practice writing their name. Those are really interesting. But yeah, there's a variety of reasons why an owner might try and erase something in a manuscript. Yeah, it's very annoying when that happens.
Yeah.
But some of those things can be recoverable, under ultraviolet light, to go back to Kate McCaffrey's research. If you've got the right light conditions and the inscription has been erased and not scribbled over, then you might be able to recover it with particular forms of lighting.
Interesting. We'll have to talk about this after the show because I don't want to reveal what I'm talking about exactly.
Okay. Yeah.
One of the other things that I'm kind of curious about is, and I probably talk a lot about letters because that's what I'm most familiar with, and it's not necessarily what you deal with as often, maybe.
Not necessarily. I've done a few letters. We've got some letters of Jane Austen in our collection and her relatives. They've been digitized. So that was great. That was one of those things where you go, oh, wow, no, that was amazing. Yes, we've got a few letters in our collection, but it's predominantly books that I've been digitizing.
So I guess my question is, when it comes to letters, and maybe you come across this in the manuscripts as well, can you tell if writing that has been done on it was done after the fact? Can you tell by the ink or anything like that might indicate? Sometimes
in digitization, you can tell if it's a different ink. You can tell if it's slightly darker or, the quality of images that I'm able to produce with the camera, the setup that I use. You can often tell very small details like that. So yeah, sometimes in some instances, I can think of some instances where you can tell the quality of digitization is particularly good that we're, able to capture. So yeah, sometimes. Are you asking for particular reasons, or is it? I feel like there's a secret agenda. Sometimes you can, yes, would be my answer.
Maybe I have a secret agenda.
We'll talk about it when we're not recording.
Yes, yes. I just, the digitizing of documents, it's so different when you view a digitized document versus seeing one in person because there's only so much you can see. I think no matter how well it's digitized, it's not the same. It's really not the same.
Yeah, there's something about handling the document, seeing it in person. When you digitize an item, we have a ruler in our digitizations to show you kind of how large the item is in real life. And so that gives you an idea. But if you're viewing it on, say, your phone or a laptop, it's just not the same. It's not the same as seeing it in person, but it's as close as, at the moment, as close as we can get. But yeah, when you're handling a real document, and you feel it. If it's vellum, you feel it. If it's, a manuscript and you turn the pages and it has a certain texture to it, that makes a certain sound when you turn the pages. There's everything about that is not capturable in a digital surrogate. Yeah, it never beats it, seeing it in person. See it in person when you can, but if not, then, digitizations will do just fine.
Yeah. I'll just keep saying over and over, I appreciate that documents are being digitized, especially for us who don't live in the UK, who are unable to get to these places to see them. It's such a cool resource for us to be able to get that close.
Really, for things to be freely available, I'm sure that you're aware of the cyber attack that happened at the British Library last year, and what a loss that was for so many researchers. For anyone who doesn't know, October last year, the Digital Library suffered a cyber attack and have been recovering ever since. And access to their massive, incredible library of digitized items was lost. They've just recently made available 1,000 digitized items again. And there's a list online of everything that's now currently available. And they're working to get their items back online. And it's incredible, absolute respect for the British Library staff who've, trying really hard to recover from that. But that just goes to show, how many researchers rely on the digitized documents, how easy it is to have these things that are freely accessible. There's so many amazing online resources. Off the top of my head, the National Archives have a lot of digitized wills that you can download. They're microfilm. That are great. You've got State Papers Online, which is an incredible resource. The British Library have just made theirs available. Trinity Library in Dublin. You've got the Digital Bodleian. Just incredible. The access to these items is just getting better every day. It really is kind of a valuable resource.
Yeah, it's amazing. I feel like I have questions, but I don't know which direction to go because is there something in particular that you wanted to talk about today?
I suppose people might be curious about how it's done, because you see the image, but you don't know what goes on behind it. So when I started the role 2 years ago, there is a blog post up on the St. John's website talking about how I digitize practically. But just for anyone who's interested, the kind of industry standard is to use what they call a conservation cradle, which is a large V-shaped cradle onto which the book is placed. And then along the side of there, you have a vacuum bar. You place the page onto, it's scary named the vacuum bar, but it's totally fine. And there's no damage to the book. You place the page onto the vacuum bar and turn the vacuum on, and it uses very light suction to hold the page in place. Above it there, you've got a camera pointed down at the page. Take the photo, and that is what you see. I'm using the Digital Bodleian setup now. That's what you see online, is a photo of that. And that's how it's done. You photograph all of the rectos first, or all of those, but it tends to be rectos because they're paginated. So it's easier to know what you've done. You do all the rectos, so that's the right pages. You turn the book around, you do all the versos, and then you reorder those images. That saves you from picking up the book back and forth. If you were to photograph, recto, verso, right side, left side, you would have to pick up the book every time, turn it around, take a photo like that. So you go through the whole book one way, turn around, go to the book the other way. And that's how it's done. That's it. That's the magic that gets things digitized. There's a more detailed description of that. Like I say, I wrote a blog post about it if anyone who's interested a bit more in the equipment, what it is, how it works. It gets a bit technical there. But I think when I was using digitized images myself, you don't think about how it was done. But there is a whole, process behind it. The equipment that's used, the checks that go into it, all of that, there's a whole process behind it before the image gets to your screen.
So what happens after your step? You do your step. Where does it go after that?
So it goes to the wonderful team over at Osney Mead, and I'm speaking about my process. We send it over to them. They quality check it. That's Osney Mead in Oxford. They make sure that everything is in the correct order, that everything is, up to standard to be allowed to put on digital Bodleian. If there's any missing images or anything's blurry or out of focus or anything like that. And then they do their magic and it goes up on digital Bodleian. So that's that process over there.
But really, let's be honest, you still have the coolest part of the job.
It's nice to be able to handle the items. Yeah, it's nice to be able to work with.
Yeah. So when you're not handling these items, where are they?
They're stored on site at St. John's, and they're all, boxed up and secure.
Yeah. I imagine like this dusty shelved units where you pull out a box and you blow on it and dust goes flying. You open and you pull out the scroll.
I think it's how people want to imagine, isn't it? But I think that a lot of conservators would have questions. If archives really were as dusty as you'd like to think, then we're doing something wrong. They need to be taken care of. They're kept in good, safe conditions.
Yeah.
There is something romantic, isn't there? There are chained libraries in England that do still survive. Chained libraries being, libraries where books were chained to the shelves as they were in the early modern period. They're few and far between. We have one chained book in St. John's College, is very exciting. But so they're out on the shelves, as you imagine, is what you're describing, looking like a medieval library and all that. But dust, no, never. Or if so, then we're doing something terribly wrong.
Yeah, that makes sense. It's like how you imagine it in the movies, right? This is how it is in the movies.
Yeah, and I think that's it, but actually, this is something that I find quite interesting. That's how it's talked about. When discoveries are made in archives, that's how it's imagined, that's how it's put out to the public. This document was discovered in some archive. It was there. If they're doing their job right, then it was kept in good condition, safe and secure and conserved. Not hidden away in some dark, dusty attic sometimes. But, when they say, such and such an item was discovered in the National Archives, it's not that it was locked away in some dark chest, drawers or whatever. It was there in a box. It just so happens that, people didn't look in the right box or it was mislabeled or whatever it might be, like the recent discovery of the Mary Queen of Scots letters. That was incredible. They were there. It's just that they were mislabeled. And I believe it was one of the researchers who found them that said we couldn't have found them if we'd gone looking for them. It's just that they were cipher breakers and then they came across this particular cipher. For some of the discoveries, and I don't want to, make too big of a deal of the discoveries that will be in my book, but for some of those, it was just a matter of getting in touch with institutions and saying, I know that you've got a box of documents, let's say related to the Howard family. On your catalogue, it says that. What is in that box? And then the librarian will get back to you and say, well, it's got X, Y, Z, So it's not that these things are hidden. There's this romanticization, I think, of discoveries in archives. And sometimes that's the case. Things have been found in country estates and things like that. But more often than not, it's just about asking the right questions or looking in the right general area and finding what was there. That might be slightly tangential to what you were saying. But yeah, find it all very interesting.
It is very interesting. It's funny because, I always picture it like there was a box in the corner and in a dark, dusty corner where they opened it and they were like, oh, look, we found this.
Yes, sometimes that happens, or sometimes that happens. Or, in the case to go back to it again for a third time, Kate McCaffrey's research where something was there. It's just that, you need the right lighting or the right pair of eyes on something to be able to notice something that was there.
Yeah.
But I think as well, while we're on this, it's slightly tangential to what we were talking about. There is a romanticization in the historical community of new discoveries. This thing was hidden and now it's been brought to light. That is so important, of course. New documents are being discovered all the time. But just as important is a re-examination of the sources that we do have and a questioning of what's already there, looking over again at the letters and papers. No, in fact, not even the letters and papers, going back to the original documents, that's behind letters and papers. Because, speaking as one Tudor historian to another, so many people stop at the letters and papers, which for anyone who doesn't know are the printed sources compiled by Victorian historian James Gardner, massively helpful resource, but they might be summaries of what the actual original document says. They might be transcribed incorrectly. And then what will happen in the letters and papers is there will be a shelf mark beside the printed summary or the printed transcript. You follow that shelf mark, and it's something in the British Library or often something in the National Archives. Yeah. And if it has an RO next to it, that means it's held by the Record Office, what's now the National Archives. And go back from letters and papers, go back further, going back to the original documents is so important. I agree that, the discovery of new items is so important and so exciting, and they're happening all the time, and it's incredible. But just as important is a re-examination of what we do have, because that's what history is. Often the sources don't change. All that changes is your view on them, or who's looking at them, who's asking what questions, which is just as important. So I'll climb off my soapbox now. I apologize.
Oh my gosh. You were giving me chills when you were talking about that, just because it's so personal to me and the work that I've been doing, like how important it was for me to go back and find these original Thomas Seymour documents that were transcribed to make sure that they actually said what he said they said, and understanding the context of it and looking at it, from what do they call, like from 500 feet above, going, okay, this is what we're really looking at now. And I feel like there's so many of those documents, like you said, that are overlooked, or they haven't been viewed again, and people aren't analyzing them, and how important it is to go back and look, because we're missing things.
Absolutely. And, to speak as a Tudor historian, as we both are, letters and papers is a great resource. Where would we be without it? Incredible. Yeah. But I think, there is a move, or at least I like to think there's a move towards looking past letters and papers and going back and seeing what does it actually say. What was actually there behind letters and papers beyond that. Yeah, very important, I think. Yeah, which is why it's so great that so many things are being digitized. It's a great field. I'm so privileged to work in this field, to make these things accessible for researchers. It's so important, accessibility and digitization, things that are more readily available now than they ever have been. You could just go online and look at the love letters that Henry VIII sent to Anne Boleyn. Yeah. They're just there. That's incredible. Getting access to them in person is a whole different thing. They're kept in the Vatican. And as far as I understand, you need 20,000 documents and the best reason in the world to go and see them in person. But that's because they're digitized. So I will say, actually, as somebody who digitizes documents, some of the items that I'm digitizing are then put on restricted access. So if something is particularly fragile, I've just digitized The History of My Troubles, which was written by William Laud, which is a particularly fragile item. So that will be put on, I believe, restricted access now that it's been digitized, which means that if a researcher does want to see it in person, they have to have a good reason to need to see the actual physical item itself, and not just get what they need from a digitization. That's done not because we're stingy and want to keep things to ourselves. It's done to protect the items, from overhandling in that case. So in some instances, I can understand why things are kept under lock and key, particularly if they have been digitized. If somebody wants to see the love letters of Henry VIII, they are available online. And, going to see them in person is a whole different situation.
There are some documents that I want to see that I'm not going to name where it's at, but they're at a specific manor house. Mm-hmm. And I so desperately want to see these. And I wasn't able to go there when I was in England, and they do not have them digitized. And I keep sending them letters, and I'm sure they're annoyed by me, but I'm like, do you have them digitized yet? Like, I'm waiting. What do I have to do?
What do you, Jen, because have you emailed the Institute and said, that you're writing this book and, you're doing that? That's the first protocol.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, that's a shame.
I know.
Even just some phone photographs to know what it is you're looking at. I assume that you don't know what it is. You just know that these things are there.
Yeah, it's a collection of family papers. And so I have no idea exactly what's in there, but I'm thinking there's something that I need in there possibly, And
it's so difficult when you don't know what you're looking for. I've made similar sort of difficult to word emails where you've had to be like, I know you've got this collection of stuff. What is it?
I know.
And then because then it's really hard, because then you're asking somebody, think about being the person on the other side of that email who has to go and pull out that dusty old box? Not that it's a dusty old box. They have to go and pull out that box of things and take a look through and see, is there anything related to this, researcher's inquiry?
Yeah.
It can be very difficult. So I understand both sides of it, but it is incredibly frustrating when you don't have access to those things. So
no. And I'm always like, I'll pay for it. Whatever I have to do, just tell me how much it's going to cost. I'll pay for whoever has to go look for these things.
Yeah, because that's obviously the other route you go down, is you get an independent researcher to go and do it for you.
Yes.
Yeah, it's difficult for people who aren't in England to be able to access those things.
Yeah. And it's so hard when I hold all this knowledge in my head already on this subject, where I'll be able to spot something quicker than somebody who isn't doing it.
When you know what you're looking for, exactly, that is really hard. Yeah. But I think that's actually what you say raises an interesting point that I will mention as well. A question that's often asked is, why aren't you digitizing everything? Or why aren't these things digitized? And I think that, often the answer is resources. The equipment is particularly expensive. If you're talking about a country estate, they could get an independent person to come in and do their digitizations for them. But then you need, to be able to host those images. I think the process of digitization is time consuming and costly, which is why a lot of places don't digitize everything. As people often say, why don't you digitize everything? It's often on researcher request that, institutes will be able to get images of whatever it is they need. It would be great if everything was freely available online, instantly. Also impossible.
Yeah.
Sorry, go on.
I was just going to say, when you said you need a place to host all of these things, that's when it really clicked to me, especially when you have images that you need to have up on a website. You have to have some large server space in order to store.
Yes. Those are the kinds of things you start to think about, right? Where do you store those images? How do you get them online? How do you host that website? Where are the original files? It's just all those kinds of questions that you don't think about when you're looking at an image online that goes on behind the scenes. And there are, digitization projects. I think it's the Vatican who are trying to digitize everything that they have in their collection, which is, I can't even imagine such a daunting task. But yeah, it would be wonderful if all institutes who housed all sorts of documents could make everything online, available online. And there certainly is a move towards digitization of a lot of places. Conversations that are going on is great. But until then, yeah, it's sending those hard emails and saying, can you take a phone photo of whatever it might be, or what do you have in this, or if you can get in your places, yeah.
Pretty please, pretty please.
Yeah, exactly.
Hi, it's me again. Will you pretty please do this? Oh, Sophie, I love talking about this with you. And I'm just, we're coming to the end here, and I want to make sure that we cover everything that you wanted to discuss, because of course I can go on my tangents about the things that are fascinating to me. But is there anything else that you wanted to make sure that people know and understand about this?
Well, I feel like I've covered a lot of things. There are, like I said, a series of blog posts on the St. John's website for anyone who wants a bit more information about how digitization works behind the scenes, a little bit more about my role. There is also the From Ink to Pixels, From Ink to Pixels exhibition, which we ran last year at St. John's, which talks in more detail about both sides of the project. That's the imaging side and the metadata side. That's all available online for free. Just go to the St. John's College Library website and everything's there. That tells people a little bit more, has photos of the equipment, photos of some of the manuscripts, explains how things are done practically, if anyone's interested in kind of more information about how it works. But I think I've covered everything. I think it's very exciting that St. John's are doing this, and are making these things available. It's such a privilege to handle these documents, make them available online. Follow me on Twitter, anybody who's interested, because I'm always posting pictures of what I'm working with and letting people know what's going to be up next. And take a look on Digital Bodleian. Just keyword search anything you're interested in. There might be something up there that digitized that you're interested in. That would be my recommendation.
Oh, perfect. And I'll include all the links in the show notes for all of this. Even those couple manuscripts, I've made notes. So you said the MS 254 and MS 301. I'm going to put those in there as well.
154. Yes, MS 154.
154. Yeah. Okay, good.
154, that one. Yeah.
I'll make that change there.
we can add links to things that are digitized, have a snoop around Digital Bodleian, anyone who's interested. There's some particularly cool things up there that were very exciting.
This was so fun. I'm so happy you decided to come back and do this episode with me, Sophie. It's different than anything I've done before, but it is a subject that I'm really passionate about. So thank you for sharing your knowledge with us today.
Very welcome. It's lovely to be back, and yeah, thank you so much for asking me back. Yeah, it's great.
We'll have you back again when your book comes out for sure. Maybe we'll find an excuse to have you back before then.
Oh, thank you very much.
And that concludes another episode of the Tudors Dynasty podcast. Thank you so much for listening. If you love the show and would like to show your support, consider becoming a patron over on Patreon. That's patreon.com/Tudors Dynasty. Over there, you'll get commercial-free episodes, early access, and some patron exclusive content as well. If you would prefer to show your support in another way, head on over to my website, tutorsdynasty.com, and click on the shop to see some of the new merchandise that I have available. Thank you so much for listening. Until next time.
The Tudors Dynasty Podcast.